Sometimes we wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, and ask ourselves, who am I? Am I living the life I was meant to live, or am I just surviving? This is the story of a young man who spent 25 years searching for his true self. It's a story of pain, confusion, and hope. A story that may sound very close to your own. Let's begin. Who am I? I am 25 years old, but if you ask me who I really am, I don't know the answer. I grew up in a small town where everyone seemed to know each other's names, but somehow, I always felt like a stranger, even in my own house. From the outside, my life looked normal. I had a family, friends, and school like every other kid. But inside, I felt empty, as if something was missing. I used to look at people around me and wonder, why do they look so happy? Why do they seem so confident in who they are, while I feel lost? When I was a child, I often heard my parents fight. They didn't fight with words, they fought with silence. My father was a hard-working man, but he never really talked to me. He came home tired, sat in front of the TV, and rarely noticed me. My mother was kind but always busy with housework and worries. I don't remember either of them ever asking me, "How are you feeling?" So, I grew up believing that maybe my feelings didn't matter. At school, I wasn't the smartest kid, nor was I the most athletic. I was somewhere in between, too average to be noticed, too shy to stand out. I remember one day when the teacher asked us to share what we wanted to become in life. Some kids said doctor, some said engineer, others said teacher. When my turn came, I froze. My mouth went dry. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't even thought about it. The teacher looked disappointed, and the whole class laughed. That day, I went home with a question echoing in my mind, who am I? As I grew older, the question only became louder. In high school, I tried to fit in. I copied what others did, laughed at jokes I didn't find funny, and agreed with opinions I didn't believe in, just so I wouldn't feel left out. People liked me, but I never liked myself. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a stranger wearing a mask. One night, when I was about 17, I sat alone in my room. The house was quiet. I remember staring at the ceiling and whispering to myself, why was I born? What is my purpose? I wanted an answer, but all I had was silence. College didn't make things easier. I chose a degree not because I loved it, but because everyone else said it was good for the future. While my classmates seemed passionate, I felt like I was dragging myself every day. I studied, I passed exams, but deep inside, I felt like a robot. There were moments when I tried to escape my confusion. I distracted myself with social media, with endless scrolling, watching people who seemed to have their lives figured out. I compared myself to them and felt even more lost. I thought maybe if I copied their lifestyle, I would feel alive too. But it never worked. Then came friendships and relationships. I had friends, yes, but none of them truly knew me. How could they, when I didn't even know myself? I dated a girl once, and she asked me, "What do you want in life?" I looked at her, and I had no answer. That relationship ended, and I blamed myself. I thought, maybe no one can love me because I don't even know who I am. By the time I turned 25, my life felt like a question mark. Every birthday candle I blew out, I wished for the same thing, clarity. But clarity never came. Then one evening, I took a long walk alone. The streets were quiet, and the cool wind touched my face. I stopped near a bridge and leaned against the railing. Cars passed by, people walked with purpose, and I stood there, frozen, lost, empty. My heart whispered again, who am I? But this time, something inside me shifted. I realized maybe the answer wouldn't come from outside. Maybe it wasn't about my parents, my teachers, my friends, or society telling me who I was. Maybe the answer was inside me, waiting for me to stop running and finally listen. That night, I promised myself, I will find out who I am. Not for the world, not for anyone else, but for me. And that was the beginning of my journey. The night I stood on that bridge, staring into the darkness, something inside me shifted. For the first time in my life, I admitted the truth. I was lost. I didn't know who I was, and I didn't know where I was going. But instead of letting that break me, I decided it was time to start searching for answers. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. I looked out of my window and whispered to myself, This is a new beginning. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. For the first time, I felt like I wanted to take control of my life, not just float through it. But where do you even start when you don't know yourself? That was the question. I began with the simplest step: silence. Every evening after work, instead of scrolling through my phone or drowning in noise, I sat quietly in my room. No TV, no music, no distractions, just me and my thoughts. At first, it was uncomfortable. My mind was full of doubts and regrets, replaying moments from my past when I felt small or invisible. But slowly, I started hearing another voice. A softer one. The voice of curiosity. It asked me, what makes you happy? What gives you peace? What excites you? I realized I had never really asked myself these questions before. I always lived by what others expected. So, I grabbed a notebook and began writing. The first page was messy, filled with random words. Music, writing, helping people, traveling, learning. They weren't answers yet, but they were pieces of me that I had ignored for years. The more I wrote, the more I discovered. I remembered how, as a child, I loved telling stories. I would sit with my younger cousins and make up little tales that made them laugh or cry. I remembered the joy in their eyes. Somewhere along the way, I had buried that part of myself because it wasn't considered practical. But in that notebook, it came alive again. I also remembered how much peace I felt when I walked alone in nature. The sound of leaves, the smell of rain, the sight of mountains, these things made me feel connected to something bigger. Yet in my busy life, I had forgotten to spend time outdoors. Slowly, these little pieces started coming together. One weekend, I decided to do something different. I packed a small bag and went hiking alone. It wasn't easy. I got tired, my legs ached, and at times I felt scared. But when I finally reached the top of the hill and looked at the world below, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. The wind touched my face, the view stretched endlessly, and for a moment, I felt alive. I whispered to myself, maybe this is who I am, someone who finds strength in simple things. The journey didn't stop there. I also began talking to myself differently. For years, I had been my own harshest critic. Every mistake, every failure, I punished myself. But now, I started speaking kindly to myself. When I messed up at work, instead of saying, "You're useless," I tried saying, "It's okay. You're learning." It felt strange at first, but slowly, it healed me. Of course, not everyone understood the changes I was making. Some of my friends thought I was acting weird. They couldn't understand why I preferred quiet evenings over loud parties. They laughed when I said I was trying to find myself. For a while, their words hurt me. I almost gave up. But then I realized I didn't need their approval. This was my journey, not theirs. One of the hardest parts of discovering myself was facing my past. There were moments I had avoided for years: the loneliness of my childhood, the feeling of being invisible, the shame of not knowing my purpose. At first, revisiting those memories made me cry. But slowly, I began to see them differently. Those struggles had shaped me. They had taught me resilience. They had forced me to search for meaning, and maybe that was the reason I was standing here today, stronger than before. I began to understand that life isn't about having everything figured out. It's about learning, step by step, who you are and what matters to you. One night, while journaling, I wrote something that changed me forever. I don't have to be perfect. I just have to be real. Those words became my guide. So, I started doing things that felt real to me. I volunteered at a community center on weekends, helping children with their studies. Watching their eyes light up when they understood something filled me with joy. I realized I loved helping people, not because it made me look good, but because it gave my life meaning. I also picked up writing again, not for anyone else, but for myself. Late at night, I poured my heart onto paper, writing stories about life, pain, and hope. Some days, the words flowed easily. Other days, they didn't. But every word I wrote felt like a step closer to myself. For the first time, I wasn't living by someone else's script. I was writing my own. Looking back, I see that the question, "Who am I?" doesn't have one final answer. It's not a puzzle you solve once and forget. It's a journey, a process, a constant discovery. At 25, I don't have it all figured out. But I no longer feel lost. I no longer feel empty. I know one thing for sure, I am not my past mistakes. I am not other people's opinions. I am not just what society expects of me. I am a seeker. I am someone learning, growing, falling, and rising again. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Life has a strange way of testing you the moment you think you're getting better. After I started journaling, hiking, and volunteering, I thought I was finally figuring myself out. But then reality hit me. Bills had to be paid, responsibilities had to be met, and the world didn't pause just because I was on a journey of self-discovery. At 25, society expects you to have it all together. A stable career, a relationship, a plan for the future. But the truth was, I didn't have any of that figured out. Yes, I had a job, but it wasn't something I loved. It was just enough to survive. I worked in an office where numbers filled the screen all day, and my soul felt smaller every time I clicked send. I kept thinking, is this what life is supposed to be? Some mornings, I didn't want to get out of bed. The emptiness returned, heavier this time. My parents started asking questions. When will you settle down? When will you get married? When will you buy your own place? Their words weren't meant to hurt me, but they did. I already felt behind in life, and their expectations made me feel like I was running in circles while everyone else was sprinting ahead. One night, after a long day at work, I sat at my desk staring at my notebook. Usually, writing made me feel better, but that night my mind was blank. I felt like a failure. I asked myself again, who am I? Am I wasting my time trying to find meaning when I should just accept life the way it is? I almost gave up, but something inside me whispered, don't stop now. So instead of quitting, I decided to face my struggles head-on. I asked myself a tough question: if money, judgment, and fear didn't matter, what would I do with my life? The answer came quietly but clearly. I would write. I would tell stories. I would help people by sharing experiences that inspire hope. At first, I laughed at myself. Writing. Who makes a living from that? But deep down, I knew it was the truth. Writing had always been my safe place, my way of understanding the world. Maybe it could be more than just a hobby. The idea scared me, but it also excited me. For the first time, I felt a spark. So, I began small. I started writing short posts online about my life, about feeling lost, about struggling with identity, about moments of hope. I didn't expect anyone to read them. But slowly, people began to respond. Some said, I feel the same way. Others said, your words gave me strength today. That was the first time I realized something powerful. I wasn't alone. The truth is, many people around me were also lost, confused, and searching. They just didn't talk about it. We live in a world where everyone pretends to be fine, where we post smiles on social media while hiding our tears in private. My writing gave people permission to be real. And in helping them, I was also helping myself. But even as I started to grow, the battles didn't end. There were days when I doubted myself. My mind screamed, you're not good enough. You'll never make it. Stop dreaming. Those voices were loud, and sometimes I believed them. I compared myself to others, people who had stable jobs, good salaries, nice cars, happy families. I felt small next to them. One evening, I broke down. I was sitting in my room, staring at my phone, scrolling through pictures of people my age achieving things I could only dream of. My chest tightened, my hands shook, and tears filled my eyes. I thought, maybe I'll never find my place in this world. Maybe I'll always be lost. But in that moment of weakness, I remembered something I had written in my notebook weeks before. I don't have to be perfect. I just have to be real. Those words saved me. I wiped my tears and reminded myself, everyone's journey is different. Some people figure out who they are at 18, some at 30, some at 50. There is no deadline for self-discovery. From that night on, I made a promise. I would stop comparing my life to others. I would measure my progress only by how far I had come from yesterday. So, I took small steps. Every day, I wrote a little. Every week, I pushed myself to share something, even if it scared me. I also continued volunteering, spending time with kids who reminded me of my younger self, the boy who felt invisible, who needed someone to tell him, you matter. When I looked into their eyes, I felt my own heart healing. And slowly, something beautiful happened. I began to feel proud of myself. Not because I had achieved great things, but because I was finally being honest with who I was. I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't wearing masks. I was me, messy, imperfect, but real. Of course, the journey wasn't smooth. Some friends drifted away because they couldn't understand why I was changing. They wanted the old version of me, the one who laughed at jokes he didn't find funny, the one who followed the crowd. But that version of me was gone. At first, losing friends hurt. I felt lonely. But then I realized, sometimes you have to let go of people who don't see the real you, to make space for those who will. And slowly, new people came into my life. People who valued honesty. People who encouraged growth. People who didn't just ask, "What do you do?" but also, "How do you feel?" For the first time, I felt like I belonged. Looking back now, I see that part of knowing who I am was not just about finding passions or hobbies. It was about learning to love myself as I am, even when the world didn't. It was about facing my fears, forgiving my past, and daring to dream of a future that looked different from what society expected. The road was still long, but I was finally walking in the right direction. Because for the first time in 25 years, I could say these words without doubt. I am enough. I may not know everything, but I am learning. And that makes me who I am. The more I tried to live honestly, the more I realized that self-discovery isn't a straight road. It's full of twists, turns, and sometimes, crashes. When I first started writing and sharing my thoughts online, the response was warm. A few people related to my words, and I felt encouraged. But as my audience grew, criticism came too. Some people mocked me, saying things like, "Stop acting like a philosopher. You're just confused." Others wrote comments that cut deep, "You're wasting your life. Get a real job." At first, I pretended their words didn't matter. But late at night, when I was alone, those voices echoed in my head. I began doubting myself again. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was wasting time. Maybe my dream of writing and helping people was just foolish. For days, I couldn't write a single line. My notebook stayed closed on my desk, gathering dust. I went back to my old habits, scrolling through social media, comparing myself to others, feeling small. It felt like I had taken 10 steps forward, only to be pushed 20 steps back. But one evening, something happened. I received a message from a stranger. It was a young girl who had read one of my posts. She wrote, "I was going through a very dark time. Your words made me feel less alone. Thank you." I stared at that message for a long time. Just one person. Out of all the noise, all the criticism, one person had found hope in my words. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. I wasn't writing for the crowd. I was writing for the ones who needed it. Even if it was just one soul, it was worth it. That night, I opened my notebook again. The words came back, not perfect, but real. And I promised myself, I will not stop. No matter who doubts me, no matter who laughs, I will keep going. But life wasn't just about writing. I still had my job, and it drained me. Sitting in front of that computer every day, doing work that didn't inspire me, made me question my choices. I began to dream about quitting and pursuing writing full-time. But fear held me back. What if I failed? What if I ended up broke? What if my parents were right, that I was throwing away a stable future? The pressure grew heavier every day. Then came a breaking point. One afternoon at work, my boss scolded me harshly for a small mistake. I sat at my desk afterward, staring at my hands, feeling my chest tighten. My heart whispered again, "This isn't where you belong." That evening, I walked home slowly. My body felt heavy, but my mind was racing. I knew I couldn't live like this forever. Something had to change. So, I made a decision. I didn't quit immediately, but I started saving money. Every extra coin, every small bonus, I put aside. I cut down on unnecessary expenses, not because I was greedy, but because I wanted freedom. Freedom to one day choose writing without fear of starving. Those months were tough. I worked during the day, and at night, I wrote. Sometimes my eyes burned with exhaustion, but my heart felt alive. I knew I was building something, even if no one else could see it yet. During this time, I also learned another important lesson. Self-discovery isn't just about chasing dreams, it's about discipline. Dreams without discipline are just wishes. If I wanted to make writing part of my life, I had to show up every day, even when I didn't feel like it. So I did. Some nights, I wrote just one paragraph. Some nights, I filled 10 pages. But I kept going. Slowly, my words began to travel further. More people reached out, saying my stories touched them. One person even told me they started journaling because of me. That was when I realized my journey wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone who felt lost, just like I once did. But along with hope came new challenges. My parents noticed my growing focus on writing, and they weren't happy. My father sat me down one evening and said, "Son, stop chasing unrealistic dreams. You need a stable life. Stop embarrassing yourself." His words hurt, not because he was cruel, but because he didn't understand. I wanted to shout, to tell him that this was my life, my path. But instead, I stayed quiet. I realized I didn't need to prove myself with words. I needed to prove myself with actions. And so, I kept working in silence. Yet, in that silence, loneliness returned. Many nights, I felt isolated, torn between two worlds, the safe life my parents wanted and the uncertain path my heart longed for. Sometimes I thought of giving up again. But then I remembered that little boy in me, the boy who once froze in class because he didn't know what he wanted to be, the boy who spent years wearing masks to fit in. I couldn't betray him. I couldn't go back to living a lie. So, I pushed forward. During this period, I also learned to take better care of myself. I started exercising, eating healthier, and spending more time outdoors. At first, it felt small, almost pointless. But slowly, I noticed the change. My mind became clearer, my body stronger, and my energy higher. I realized something simple but powerful. To discover who you are, you must first take care of the vessel you live in, your body and mind. By the time I reached my 25th birthday, I wasn't successful by society's standards. I didn't own a house. I wasn't married. I wasn't rich. But for the first time, I wasn't lost. I knew what I wanted, and I was walking toward it. And on that birthday night, as I blew out the candles, I didn't wish for clarity anymore. I wished for courage. Courage to keep walking, no matter how hard it got. Because I finally understood. Who I am is not defined by what I own, or by what others say. Who I am is defined by the choices I make every day, by the courage to live honestly, and by the love I put into the world. That night, I wrote in my journal, "I am not searching for who I am anymore. I am becoming who I am." And that realization changed everything. Life has a way of testing how serious you are about your dreams. It doesn't give you success easily. It pushes you, breaks you, and asks, "Do you really want this?" After my 25th birthday, I felt stronger than before. I had a clear vision. I wanted to write, share my journey, and help others through my words. But clarity doesn't mean the road gets easier, it just means you know which mountain you need to climb. And my mountain was steep. The first big step I took was deciding to publish my writing in a more serious way. Until then, I had only posted short thoughts online. But now, I wanted to write longer pieces, essays, stories, maybe even a book one day. I poured my heart into my first real project. For weeks, I worked late into the night, sometimes until sunrise. I wrote about my struggles with identity, loneliness, and finding purpose. When I finished, I felt proud. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I sent it out to a few small websites, hoping they would publish it. I waited days with excitement, checking my email every hour. Then the replies came. One by one, they all said the same thing: "Sorry, not a good fit." Some didn't even reply at all. At first, I tried to stay calm. Rejection is part of life, I told myself. But deep inside, it hurt. I felt like I had opened my heart to the world, only for the world to say, "Not good enough." For days, I couldn't write. I started believing the old voices again. The ones that whispered, "You're wasting your time. No one cares. You'll never make it." But then something happened. One evening, I went back to my old notebook, the one where I had scribbled words like music, traveling, helping people, writing. I flipped through the pages and stopped at a sentence I had written months ago. "I don't have to be perfect. I just have to be real." Those words hit me like a wave. I realized I was focusing too much on outside approval. I was measuring my worth by whether strangers accepted me. But wasn't my whole journey about being real, not perfect? So I picked up my pen again. This time, I didn't write for websites. I didn't write for publishers. I wrote for myself. And strangely, those words turned out to be the most powerful. When I shared one of those pieces online, it reached more people than anything I had written before. Hundreds of messages poured in. People said things like, "This is my story too," and "You put my feelings into words." It was then I realized, rejection doesn't mean failure. Sometimes, rejection is just redirection, pushing you back to your true path. But just as I was regaining my strength, life threw me another challenge. My job situation worsened. The company was cutting staff, and I was asked to leave. At first, I panicked. How would I pay bills? How would I survive? I remember walking home that day with tears in my eyes. The streets were crowded, people were rushing to their destinations, and I felt invisible again, like the boy I once was. My chest tightened with fear. Maybe my father was right. Maybe I was irresponsible. Maybe chasing dreams was just a luxury I couldn't afford. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, drowning in doubt. But then I remembered the bridge, the place where I had once promised myself I would find out who I am. I thought about all the progress I had made since then. Was I really going to give up now? No. I decided to see this setback not as the end, but as a test. Losing my job gave me time. It gave me the chance to put even more energy into writing. It was scary, yes. But sometimes, the scariest moments are also the most important. So I tightened my budget, lived simply, and focused on my craft. I wrote daily. I improved my style. I read books about storytelling, motivation, and self-growth. I treated writing like a real job, even if no one was paying me yet. There were nights when hunger and fear kept me awake, but I kept going. And slowly, little doors began to open. A small online magazine accepted one of my essays. A community group invited me to speak about my story. Even a teacher reached out and said she was using my words to inspire her students. They were small wins, but they were proof. Proof that I was on the right path. Yet, the biggest lesson I learned during this time wasn't about writing, it was about resilience. I realized that who you are is not defined by what happens to you, but by how you respond to it. Losing my job didn't break me. Rejection didn't silence me. Criticism didn't stop me. Every obstacle became part of my story, part of the answer to the question, who am I? I am someone who falls but gets back up. I am someone who turns pain into purpose. One evening, after finishing a long piece, I went for a walk. The air was cool, the stars filled the sky, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. Not because I had achieved everything I wanted, but because I finally understood something important. Who I am is not a fixed destination. It's a journey. Every failure, every rejection, every small win, it all makes me who I am becoming. I smiled that night, not because life was perfect, but because I was finally okay with imperfection. And that was the greatest freedom I had ever felt. When I look back at my 25 years, it feels like I have lived many different lives. The lost child, the confused teenager, the masked young adult, and now, the seeker, the learner, the fighter. And yet, the question still lingers. Who am I? For years, I thought the answer would come like a thunderbolt, a clear voice from the sky saying, "This is who you are." But now, after everything I've been through, I understand it differently. The answer doesn't come all at once. It comes slowly, piece by piece, through every struggle, every choice, every lesson. I used to think I needed to be someone great in the eyes of the world to matter. A successful professional, a person with wealth, status, and applause. But now, I realize that isn't true. Who I am is not defined by titles, possessions, or opinions. Who I am is defined by how I choose to live each day. I am the choices I make when no one is watching. I am the words I write when my heart feels heavy. I am the way I treat people, even when they have nothing to give me in return. I am the courage to stand back up every time life knocks me down. That's who I am. But the journey isn't over. In fact, it never will be. Because identity isn't a final destination, it's a lifelong process. You don't wake up one day with all the answers. You keep growing, changing, learning. And that's okay. That's what makes life real. One evening not long ago, I went back to the same bridge where my journey began. The same place where I had once leaned against the railing, empty and lost, whispering, "Who am I?" But this time, I stood taller. The wind touched my face, just like before, but my heart felt different. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was full of scars, yes, but also full of strength. I whispered again, "Who am I?" And the answer came, not from the sky, not from anyone else, but from within me. I am me. Flawed. Growing. Real. And that's enough. In that moment, I realized something important. Maybe the real question was never, "Who am I?" but rather, "Who am I becoming?" Because every day, with every choice, I am shaping the answer. That thought gave me peace. Now, when people ask me about my life, I don't pretend anymore. I don't hide behind masks or fake smiles. If I'm struggling, I say so. If I'm growing, I celebrate it. And when someone else feels lost, I tell them, "It's okay. You're not alone. We're all searching. We're all becoming." I share my story not because it's extraordinary, but because it's real. And sometimes, being real is what the world needs most. I may not have a big house, a fancy car, or a powerful job title, but I have something better, peace in my heart. I wake up knowing that I am walking my own path, not someone else's. And even if I stumble, even if I fall, I know I'll rise again, because that's who I am. And maybe that's the message I want to leave behind. To anyone listening, to anyone who has ever asked themselves the same painful question, "Who am I?" Know this, you don't have to have all the answers today. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be real. Ask yourself, what makes me feel alive? And follow it. Ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to be? And start becoming that person. Don't live for others' approval. Don't measure your worth by society's standards. You are not a job title. You are not a paycheck. You are not a mistake. You are a story in progress. A work of art still being painted. And every day, with every step, you get to choose who you are becoming. So now, when I look in the mirror, I don't see a stranger anymore. I see someone who has been broken but not defeated. Someone who has been lost but found himself again. Someone who still has miles to go, but is finally walking in the right direction. I smile and say, "This is me. This is who I am." And that is enough. Final note. If you've ever asked yourself, "Who am I?" remember this, your story is still being written. Don't be afraid of being lost. Don't be afraid of being imperfect. Just keep going. One day, you'll look back and realize, you've been becoming yourself all along.